Thank you all for being here. This is Talent Acquisition and Recruiting Virtual Panel, the shortcuts you take, how to improve efficiency and reduce time to hire without sacrificing quality. Super excited about this conversation. Quickly on kind of structure, we're going to be doing a 35-ish minute conversation with these three rock stars. Hopefully I'm not doing much talking because nobody's here to listen to me. And then we're going to be doing a 25-minute Q&A. Ask questions in the chat, in the Q&A, or if you want to raise your hand virtually, your face won't appear, but we'll get to hear your voice. It's a lot of fun. Lets me live out those radio host, podcast host dreams, but no worries either way. And any questions we don't get to, because I do expect a lot of questions, we'll bring it onto the Vray platform and we'll get to as many as we can afterwards as well. So thank you three for being here. Really, really excited to have you. Before I get started, I do want to thank our sponsor, BrightHire. Really appreciate BrightHire's partnership. Could not do events like this without you. BrightHire is a leading interview intelligence platform, transforms hiring for high growth companies like Sourcegraph, Mural, Superhuman, SalesLoft by helping individuals run better interviews and helping teams hire faster with less bias. BrightHire automatically records and transcribes interviews and using AI to create highlights that can be revisited and shared right within the ATS. Teams use BrightHire to streamline their interview process, ramp recruiters, and train interviewers, and give hiring managers better information to make the best possible hiring decisions. We're excited to offer a free pilot to members of the Vray community when they sign up for BrightHire. Request the demo at brighthire.ai. That's brighthire.ai. Reach out to me or anyone on the Vray team if you want to be connected and take advantage of that free pilot. Thank you, BrightHire, so much for the awesome partnership. All right, let's do this thing. Let's start with introductions. I'm just going to go around the horn. Elizabeth, thanks so much for being here. Tell me about yourself.
Thank you. Elizabeth Shober Smith, which I rarely use. I lead recruiting, global recruiting at Udemy. Udemy is an online learning company. My team size is a little over 50. We're global. And I've been in recruiting for 30 years, 20 years in agency and 10 years in corporate. And I still love it. I still love it. So
I love it. Thanks so much for being here, Elizabeth. I had the pleasure of being at a Vray talent acquisition dinner with Elizabeth a month or so ago. So everyone listening in, come to more events. Can't wait to meet you all. Next up, Carly, tell me about yourself.
Hey y'all, my name is Carly Jones. I am the head of people at a company called Sourcegraph. We are a Series D Sequoia Andreessen backed software company making developers' lives easier and more efficient. I joined a year ago. I was talent team employee number 1. I was employee 100 at my company. We now have a talent team of 11. And the company is nearing 300, so about 200 hires in the past year. Prior to that, similar to Elizabeth, I started my career in the agency world. I see one of my old bosses as an attendee here. Shout out to Kevin. And I then transitioned into software. So I was with 2 high growth software companies, Exactly Corporation and SalesLoft, scaled both talent teams. Hiring globally, have taken one of those companies public, so got to experience that. And I'm super excited to be here today for this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carly. And Kevin, you better say something nice in the chat. Come on. Last but not least, Shayna, how are you doing?
I am great. Super happy to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. I know it can be tough sometimes to grab the lunch hour, but I'm Shayna. I am head of talent acquisition at Grindr. Have spent the last decade scaling private equity and venture-backed startups, so unicorns and beyond, prepping companies for exit. My sweet spot tends to be about 60 people to 600. That's where I love the chaos and sort of the build, if you will. So I tend to come in as a TA team of 1 and then build and sort of structure process and then move on to the next build, once the team is set up. So I'm here today to share areas of expertise within that scope. Certainly Elizabeth is going to have a lot more to say beyond 600 people, probably Carly as well. So I'm here as the startup rep, if you will, but love building talent acquisition. And I think a lot of what we'll talk about today is the importance of fundamentals, I expect, right? It's like the sooner that you can start thinking about structure, equity, and consistency, the better you're going to have downstream impact on time to hire and all these other ways that you can set yourself up for success. So super excited again to be here, and I'll stop talking now and kick it back to Zach.
No, I love it. Thanks so much for the quick introduction to everybody. We'll get started. I have a couple questions I want to ask, and then we'll move to Q&A. Feel free to write in the chat the entire time. Let us know how you're feeling, and then I'll let everybody know. We'll move to Q&A. Write in the chat, write in the Q&A, or raise your hands. I'll only mention that 100 times. But I think what I want to kick off this conversation with is asking you all a little bit about how have the rules for recruiting changed over the past couple of years. I'll pause there. I know I can get into specifics, but I want to hear from you all. Elizabeth, kick us off.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, the rules for recruiting, it's gotten really super competitive. And I think that we're all really clear about that. And when COVID happened in March of 2020, the environment changed a lot of rules for us. So we used to have offices that people came into. First of all, we did everything virtually, but we had to start recruiting differently because we had to start thinking about hybrid environments and work arrangements and what's that going to look like, and is that going to be just for a period of time or now? And now we're coming back to the office and we're understanding that people people got used to working at home and they miss the social aspect of the office. So how do we build a situation so people get the best of both worlds? And then how do we structure it in a way that we can continue to recruit and be competitive? Because people don't really, people are like, hey, I want remote only, but they really don't, so it's learning it's really understanding the environment and being able to articulate that clearly to people. And then with now that we're coming out of COVID, it's gotten so competitive. I think we all are experiencing people are shopping offers, and to be able to cut through that and understand how do we, and Shane and I had a really good conversation on this, how do we speak to their heart, and how do we give them the kind of experience that they want to come to our organization, and really doubling down on that. And Shayna, you and I talked about that yesterday. I mean, that was what we discussed, is that high touch as a way to separate us.
Yeah. I mean, so Zach, to your point, or sort of question, like what's different? Everything is different. I would say that if you haven't heard that saying, like recruiters are the new software engineers, so true. It's nice in one way, because I think recruiters are finally starting to be appreciated for how much good versus bad recruiting is a differentiation in success, right? For scaling a business. And then where do you land within that? I mean, every rule post-COVID, or sort of during this time where COVID still goes on, it's different. Like even the metrics I used to use for senior tech recruiters and what I expected them to be able to close per quarter totally doesn't work anymore because it's harder, right? So I used to say, 8 to 10 starts per quarter, totally reasonable. It's looking more like 6 to 8. All the numbers change, and then all the downstream impact of that changes. So your top of funnel has to be broader, right? The conversion that you have between stage has to be better. And where does it all land? I mean, ultimately, a lot of that goes back to how high touch your recruiters are. I think the power is that that's free, right? Like recruiters, okay, you got to pay them, right? You have to build your team. But how you choose to run your process, you don't have to pay extra to have a high touch recruiting model, at least in the way that your recruiters engage with candidates. And that's going to be a huge impact on your ability to close, like from start to finish, in terms of how invested candidates feel that you and the team are in their success and sort of fit within the company. So Carly, I'd be super curious. I don't know if that resonates with you. You were nodding at the numbers piece. So.
That's actually interesting. So I'll a couple things. So first and foremost, like now more than ever, we have to be hiring really good recruiters and enabling them to be not just like order takers and like resume slingers, but advisors to the business. And I mentioned that I oversee the people team. So it's been really interesting with the recruiters that I've been bringing on. I've actually been treating them both as the recruiters, but also people partners to our business. So really getting the buy-in, really being seen as business advisors. I feel silly plugging Bright Hire like right off the bat if they're a sponsor. So I promise they did not ask me to do this. But another thing that has been game changing for me in ensuring, as I've been building my team literally from myself and up, is making sure that we're enabling the right way, ensuring that we're focused on hiring manager happiness, on candidate happiness, on like efficacy, speed, scalability, so that we can win. And I don't know if I would actually challenge those numbers, Shayna, because like my numbers, I'm like, I want to be the best. And like, I'm not going to let this market impact my recruiting team's drop in acceptance rate or drop in productivity. So how can we continue to think and challenge, like, how are we going to keep being the best in this market that is evolving and changing? And like, how do we stay on the cutting edge? And that's what has been like top of mind for me as I've been building this team.
Yeah, I
So
just
how
want
are
to
you?
thing about the numbers, because
Mhm.
what we've noticed, and I don't know if you all have, is the numbers at the top of the funnel, people are self-selecting out. So when I run my numbers and bench them against last year, it literally takes almost a third, well, more like 40 to 60% more recruiter screens to get that higher than it did a year ago. So I just need, and my CEO is always like, why do you need so many recruiters? I'm like, well, here's the numbers, because it used to take 15 screens to get a hire or 10 screens to get a hire. And now it's taking 20 or 25 or 30 to get a hire. And so really focusing the recruiters on knowing that they've got to stay, laser focused on keeping that activity level up, so we can get the people to move through that funnel. It's really gotten different. Yeah, but and what you said is, that conversion rate at the end. I mean, we're trying to maintain ours, and depending on the group. And I, by the way, I'm really into open source. It's how we all get better. So I'm going to share stuff. I'm going to share stuff. We run about 80% in some of the groups, and engineering is lower than that. And when I went to the San Francisco market where we are, I was hearing of companies who are at like 25 to 30%. We're stronger than that. We sit at around 60 to 65% for engineering, and that's the offer to hire ratio. But and that hasn't changed tremendously. But what has changed is that top of the funnel ratio, and just needing to do more work up front to get the people to come through.
Yeah, totally resonates. We're facing the same issue, which is just if you want to keep or improve time to hire, which is a tall order in this market, it's seeming much more than it used to be like a numbers game. So it's not just about how efficient is your process. You can do so many solves there, but it is just seeming to be a huge focus on the sourcing game. That's what Grindr's doing as well. We're reevaluating right now. Do we actually have enough sourcing capacity to hit the numbers that we need to hit to be successful for the business? Short answer is no, right? We need to fix that immediately. But it's such a challenge, because you also, in that process, when you're thinking about time to hire, you do want to balance efficiency with fit for the company, right? Like at the end of the day, you still want to be advancing the values of the company. You want to be thinking about representation. You want to be thinking about hiring the best possible people for the role and not adjusting that. And so I do think that there is value in reducing time to hire as much as you can, but only to a certain extent. Like, I think the real question is, what's better for the business in the short run versus the long run? Like, would you rather have 7 hires that advance the business's goals around representation, inclusion, or 8 hires that, hit the number, but aren't really hitting on those other components or goals? So it is like there's a sweet spot there, I think, for me, where I would choose 2 days slower in time to hire if it meant that we were making better long-term choices for the business, right? In terms of people we think are going to stay longer, who are more invested in our mission and our values, than just getting a butt in the seat and sort of hitting that goal. So it's tough, right? It's a push-pull. I mean, those can be really antithetical goals.
I love it. I know we could have an entire conversation on every one of these topics, but I got a couple more questions I want to get through, and I appreciate it. So one question I had, and maybe it's selfishly, as a startup, but how do you attract talent with limited resources? Sometimes you can't compete with compensation alone. What are you guys doing there? Asking for a friend who used to be in events. But what are you guys doing here?
I'll start with this one. I can lean in and say, so before COVID, we were a remote first company. So we have no intention of having an office. And what that means is we've really had to lean in and think about, like, how do we build culture? How do we get engagement? How do we attract and retain? And one of the things that we've leaned into, which felt cutting edge when we were first doing it, and more companies are catching up, but it's not being prescriptive in where people need to work. I have somebody on my team right now who's living in Mexico, somebody who's living in Hawaii, people who are traveling all over the place. We don't have prescriptive time. So I have found that as long as I'm, again, bright hire plug, it's I record my recruiters. They can listen to each other. They can learn from one another. They can listen to hiring managers and how from start to finish the recruitment process is going to ensure that it is at the quality that we expect. And because of that, like I've got a recruiter in Thailand, I've got a recruiter in Japan, and I am sitting in Denver, Colorado, and I'm not able to do ride-alongs. So how are we giving that to the company where everybody gets to choose their hours? If you want to work a 3-day work week, go for it. It's all about results focus. And then just focusing on all of the other perks that we're offering to our teammates. And we also are completely open source. So we've got a handbook. I've got like my entire talent process documented, how I'm able to have, I've got a 36-day time to fill for my engineering team. And like we scaled 200 people with a team of 11, not even fully ramped recruiters. So we also are a really cool company. Come check us out. And we have a lot to offer, but it is because of some of those perks, the freedom we're giving to our teammates to live anywhere in the world, work when they want, learn how they want. And that's all allowing us to attract people quickly and we have like a over 95% acceptance rate across the board.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing.
But it's also, I hire, like think about recruiters who are really good. It's like we're salespeople. And as long as we're aligned at the beginning of the process and we've got our value prop and, we're making sure we have an efficient process. We've got a short process, right? Like there's a certain point where there's not an ROI and having more interviews, more is not better. Like how can we cater to our candidates to get what we need to understand if we're making a good hire, to your point, Shayna, like not just getting butts in seat, but also be catering to the market who they have, so many opportunities that they could take. Why are they going to pick us? And we are constantly reevaluating why are we the best place for them to work.
Yeah. That's so fantastic, Carly. And Elizabeth, Shayna, same question, but the three of you are at awesome brands, really, really cool companies, right? What advice would you give folks who maybe don't have that to lean on? Is there any tricks? And are there any easy ways? And I know I'm kind of asking an impossible question, but are there any ways that folks who don't have that organizational support to get the right folks when they can't compete with compensation?
Shayna?
I know, again, this could be a whole panel. Yeah, I mean, especially, again, this is sort of my wheelhouse, right? Usually when companies are pre-exit, especially when they're early, that doesn't mean they're always highly profitable in the model. So there are a lot of restrictions, right? There's often, so I think the high level answer is take inventory. When we're talking about time to hire in general, and that's time to hire includes everything, right? It's the way that you advertise all the way through your offer acceptance rate and your retention rate. So when you think about it, take inventory of everything. Take inventory of your process, take inventory of your involvement, your engagement with your stakeholders, take inventory of your EVP or whatever you want to call it, your value prop, your employer value proposition. What are you offering employees and how is that differentiated, right? So your mission, vision, values, your total rewards package, what you offer in growth, what your hiring managers do to progress people. So the entire life cycle of an employee, like take stock of that first. That's free. You can do that as a leader, right? Same thing with your data. Data is free. Take an Excel class at a local community college if you suck at Excel. Like you can do this, so do the things that you need to do, even if you don't have cash for a consultant. Get an idea of where your process is, what your data is, what your value prop is. And then if we're talking front of funnel, get really clear on what you're offering and how it's differentiated. Not every person cares about salary. If you run into those incredible candidates who do, you have to be okay with parting ways, right? And early, save yourself time. I love Carly's nods. Carly, yep, you're feeling the efficiency. Save yourself time, let it go. Do not chase people that you know from the outset that you cannot get, right? So part of the challenge at push-pull of TA is you're always going to be behind on headcount, unless you're Carly. You're always going to be, facing these challenges with close. And so you're always going to feel behind, but you cannot let that sense of urgency drive the wrong decisions for you and for the business. So walk away from candidates that you cannot attain, and then find the candidates that are compelled by your differentiators, whatever they are. Maybe it's your total rewards package. Maybe it's fully remote and geo. Maybe it's your mission and the fact that you feel like compared to other tech companies or other industries, you genuinely are offering a differentiated experience and impact, right? Or the hiring manager is the best developer of people you've ever worked with. So find those gems, continue that story, and then adapt your process as you need to help support that story, right? So if you're working with a hiring manager you know is exceptional, make sure that that hiring manager is involved in the process and helps you close that candidate, you know, start to finish. Again, I could go on forever, but I would say take stock, know what you offer, and walk away are probably the three biggest points that I would leave people with.
Yeah, you articulated that really well. The thing that I just might add to that is we've done a lot of work in engaging the hiring managers in the process a little more. So they actually have more touch points, and we work in training them how to have those conversations with candidates because like you said, Shayna, you know, someone may choose that manager over everything else. I mean, that's usually the number one reason why people come and why they leave. And so we're just trying to work with the managers more and double down on training them how to articulate the EVP, how to be engaged in the process, how to do champion calls at the end of the process, which we didn't used to do. And that helps because people speak the language of the heart, and that's how people connect and want to come. So personalizing a little more, I think, helps.
I love that. I love that. Thanks so much. And appreciate all the questions, everybody. We're going to get that there in about 10 minutes. Keep them coming. Raise your hand. Ask questions in the Q&A. It'll be a lot of fun. But let's keep going. What are some strategies or initiatives that you're all doing to reduce your hiring time and improve efficiency in this process? I know that's a lengthy question, but how are we getting better and more efficient at hiring?
Want me to start with this one?
Okay,
What do you think I'm going to say? I'm going to say bright hire. Seriously? I swear. Okay. So when I joined a year ago, my hiring managers weren't trained. We'd never had a talent team before. We were spending millions of dollars on agency fees, and truly, like, there was no process. Sure. So one of the things that I cared deeply about is establishing the right process from the beginning that catered to the market. Made my mantra for my team is we will be the best recruiters our candidates ever talk to, bar none, regardless of hiring outcome. We will be the best recruiting team that our hiring managers have ever met, bar none. And we will not stop until we get there. And one of that means it's like creating the buy-in and the relationship early on with our hiring managers so they trust us. So we spent a lot of time in the beginning enabling our hiring managers, teaching them why it's important to limit the amount of time we're interviewing, why there's not an ROI in having 10, 20 steps in a process. And, there's a lot of articles out there that suggest that having interviews at 5.5 hours or less are just as effective as having more time spent. So getting the buy-in that way with data. And then we implemented tools to allow us to be really efficient and effective. So we're Greenhouse users, obviously LinkedIn Recruiter, but got really, really clear on our metrics quickly. I love Greenhouse, very good friends with the head of sales. I will say this to everybody, I do not love their metrics. So we use Talent Wall to give me more insight into our metrics, as well as a tool called Ashby, which is a bit more of like a NetSuite, more advanced tool, really understanding where our process is working, where it isn't. And then again, Bright Hire really helped us because it meant that when one person is saying, tell me about yourself, the rest of the panel could go and listen to that in advance to prepare. So we're not repeating ourselves. And we're really able to be efficient and strategic in what we're asking. We're able to be structured. We're giving everybody a fair experience. There's no bias that's impacting our hiring, and we're able to make an effective, fast decision at the end of the day, which allows us to win the candidates because we can move faster than anybody else.
Elizabeth, Shayna, what are you guys seeing here? What technologies are you using to help with hiring and speed and efficiency? Is it helping? Is it not helping? What are you seeing?
I'll go. So we use testing. So we use HackerRank, which helps with our evaluation of the engineers. We also use Searchlight in terms of a tool, which helps us. We actually do have reference checking. It's not really reference, but it's more like testimonials. And it gives the managers more information about what they would be seeing in terms of what that candidate brings to the table. But I wanted to actually just follow up on something that Carly said, and I have a business case. Just to share this, in our EMEA region, and Dublin is our headquarters, I brought someone in to be the director. And when she came in, we had 170-day time to fill. We had recs that were sitting there for 9 months for enterprise salespeople. And she has driven that down. It's like she slacked me a day. It's 38 days. So from 170 to 38. And it's just the thing. And those are and this is what Carly just talked about. We looked at the length and the structure of the interviews. We looked at redundancy in the interviews and eliminated the redundancy. And we also secured agreements from the teams that we could schedule over one-on-ones that they had with other people in the organization, so we could get those interviews on the calendar, because everyone's calendars today are booked. But probably the most impactful thing we did was hiring managers were interviewing someone for like half an hour and then passing them to a panel. And so they weren't taking accountability, and they were just moving people through a process, which created unnecessary work for a lot of people. And we were able to show them that using the tools that we have, like Greenhouse, how many hours is this taking, and when we take hours and we translate it into cost, what is this costing the organization? And they have agreed, and they do a much more thorough upfront call in the beginning to take accountability and ownership for whether that candidate is really good. And so now they're passing candidates that they think that they would actually hire, instead of just like passing people through just because they're shopping. And that was a huge change for us that really helped make that impact. I mean, we had one rec, and we have all heard this, like, recruiting, you're not doing your job. I need to see more candidates. They panel interviewed 19 people and didn't have an offer. I said, that's not a recruiting problem. That's not recruiting, that's alignment. And so just doubling down on the things that Carly talked about, I think have been really helpful for us.
Amen. We use all the same tools that Carly and Elizabeth use, including Talent Wall, same reason. Data, right? What I would say is you don't have to be a data science major to be good at this, right? So whether you are comfortable in Excel, whether you have to find a tool like Talent Wall, whatever the case is, most ATSs will provide some kind of data. I highly recommend Greenhouse in terms of raw data, but you need to feed it into something, either Excel or Talent Wall, because its data visualization is garbage. Lever does a better job probably of that. But if you can prioritize for free, again, running a recruiting process where you train your recruiters to use the system correctly, you train your coordinators to use the system correctly, and you start to get a foundation of actual reliable data, that will be your most powerful and free tool to inform all the other decisions that you make and argue for, right, as a TA leader, whether you have a team of 1 or whether you have a team of 100. So double down on the value of data, especially pass-through rates. I will say, and I don't know if Elizabeth or Carly have suggestions here. One of the things I've really struggled with in general in the industry is getting alignment or sort of industry-specific data I rely on for what a good pass-through rate or good offer closes are, right? Like I talked to my LinkedIn rep, I asked Greenhouse, we look at Radford. I'm still convinced all of those organizations are way behind the 8 ball and actually collecting this and getting accurate data. So I would love to know, I don't know if you all use, crowdsource sources, or you have your own sort of parameter for what those pass-through rates look like, but that's some sort of a North Star that we haven't landed on yet that we should, right? We should have that by now. And it's something we need to focus on in 2022.
I agree, Shayna. And I think it's obviously department specific to a certain degree, right? Like engineering always skews the numbers. One of the things that I want to hit home, I can pull specific numbers, and definitely I'm happy to follow up, because I kind of look at it more at department by department level. But one of the things I really want to hit home on is going back to like the buy-in at the beginning and really having the relationship with the hiring manager, I think is critical to all of this. Because if you have that relationship, you are not seen as somebody who's gonna, Elizabeth, like send 19 people or set up 19 interviews, and you're able to push back. I shut searches down if my hiring manager talks to 3 people and they're not pushing those folks forward. I'm like, this is a you problem. You have not gotten the recruiter and the hiring manager, they need to be in lockstep. I want my recruiter to be an extension of the hiring manager. I want them to know exactly what that hiring manager is looking for. And if we're missing the mark 3 times in a row, it's time for a recalibration. And just doing that, that is going to speed up the process so much. And it is going to build so much respect and like mutual agreement and accountability between the recruiter and the hiring manager. I personally, I believe in the metrics just generally of like 10 recruiter screens to 5 submittals to a hiring manager to 3 calls to 1 hire, right? That's like
That's
basic.
what I use.
Like old
Yeah,
school.
same.
Haven't stopped using that. I really believe in it. And I don't think that like my recruiters are not a volume shop. I pay them way too much. They're not like screening all these, like they are strategic partners to the business and they are empowered to act like that.
Let's move to questions. We have so many. Time flies. I told you that would happen. We got about 30 minutes left. Everyone, last time I say it, I promise, if you raise your hand, I'll call on you. It makes it really fun. First time caller, long time listener. If not, tons of questions we can get through. So let's do it. Mackenzie asked this question super early, so I want to ask it first. How are you mitigating bias within your TA processes? And this is open to everybody. If everybody can go pretty quick and just give a little explanation of what they're doing, that'd be awesome.
I can go first on this one. I mean, I'm going to echo what Carly already said. Like the power of a tool like Greenhouse is that it supports structured interviewing. So it all starts with the foundation. Is your interview process aligned? Is it consistent? Do you have focus areas for every single stage? And is the hiring manager owning, prepping each of their stakeholders with what their focus areas are and what they're supposed to get? So Grindr runs a highly structured process for a 150-person company. Hiring managers own that preparation, and then recruiters own the candidate prep, right? So recruiters let every single candidate know across the board what to expect in that process. And we use that as a parameter to make sure that we're making the best possible and most fair decisions that we can throughout the recruiting process. There's a lot we could talk about with front of funnel sourcing and prioritizing DEI in how you go to market, but the question is specific to mitigating bias. The other piece is we have every single hire go through inclusion training, right? So what I love about Grindr, it's queer first company. Like I'm part of the queer community. It's important to me to be in a space where I can feel comfortable, and that's an incredible and sort of rare experience. And so for Grindr especially, you know, the impact of misgendering someone or the impact of asking questions about someone's personal identity or body are really harmful, right? And so part of it as well is not just thinking through how you hire someone to mitigate that bias in the process, but then what are you doing to train everyone internally, right, around inclusion? There's a lot of debate around unconscious bias training specifically and whether that's impactful or not. So what we focus on is equity and inclusion, right? So how do we, especially within the LGBTQIA community, how do we prepare every single person in our company, ally or not, to do the best they can to ensure that they're bringing that expertise and sort of that awareness to their coworkers, to the process itself, and to candidates.
To echo that, I highly recommend training and specifically talking about unconscious bias. We had all of our leaders read the Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias and received really positive feedback. So I do recommend that book. Obviously, I dropped a link to our handbook in the chat, and we have like every single step in our process is transparent to every candidate. Every question that everybody gets asked is the exact same. Our candidates even can see most of the questions they're going to be asked before the interview. And that is something that I really believe in, because interviewing should not be a test. We should be leveling the playing field and really assessing whether or not they're going to be the right match for us and vice versa. Other things that we do, having the ability to listen back on my recruiters, to watch how my hiring managers are leading interviews, for them to go back and calibrate and watch each other, has really developed this like kind of culture of accountability and transparency within the recruiting space that has it allowed us to all care deeply and hold each other accountable to do the right thing and make sure we're hiring based on skill set and ability, not on anything else. So another plug for Bright Hire, but it really has been like such a game changer for us. For me as a talent leader to be able to make sure that my team is meeting our mutual expectations, but also to just really enable our hiring managers to be the best they can be to hire the right people in a really, really fair, efficient way.
Love it. Thanks so much.
And we're doing all the same things. One add to that is we're having conversations around evaluating candidates against the job description and not against each other. Because we notice like, well, let me see another person or who else is out there. And are they qualified to do the job? Well, yeah. Do they bring the values that we want to hire for? Yeah, well then let's make the decision. Because it's when we go into a danger zone when we start to just shop other people to compare them against other people. But everything else that Carly.
I'm actually, if I can say one more thing about job descriptions, because one of the things that I actually borrowed from Lever way back when is they were writing all of their job descriptions in impact job description format. So if anybody isn't aware of what that is, it focuses on the impact a candidate will make, not on like the list of requirements that somebody needs to have. And that is one of the first things that I did when I joined is I rolled out impact job descriptions, and also at the beginning of the template that every hiring manager has access to, and it's also in our handbook, talked about like why we write job descriptions in that way. And it is to level the playing field and not prevent underrepresented people from applying simply because they don't feel like they meet the list of requirements that are listed on a traditional job description.
Love that. Thanks so much, Carly. And everybody, if you do have, questions or posts or anything like this, feel free to use the Verate platform. It should feel like an open source. We should all be trying to help each other. So thanks so much. And definitely feel free to share that and continue the conversation. Let's keep going because we got 20 minutes and we got so many questions coming in. Nobody raised their hand, so I'm going to cry. But besides that, we have a lot of questions. Jonathan asked, I know Shayna used an example of 6 to 8 starts per quarter. What's a typical number of starts you'd each expect from a single recruiter in a typical month or quarter? Jonathan.
All right, before I go down in
man.
history, but like I know, like putting it's very.
I love it.
Like, put a
I'm like
stake in
pulling
the
up my talent wall right now.
I know.
Which department are we talking?
Yeah. That's the only thing I would say is I use it as a, broad strokes. I would have said overall that a senior tech recruiter, I'd expect 8 to 10 starts sort of pre-COVID, right? But it's so relative. That's what the only thing I would say is you want to get more nuanced than that. What is the level of your recruiter? What is the level of roles that they're working on? And what is the impact for the business? So someone working on exec roles, I'd be surprised if they were landing 6 to 10 a quarter, right? If those are VP plus, depends on the scope. So in general, would be super curious to see what everyone else is seeing. We're seeing somewhere between, let's say 6 and 12 starts a quarter, depending on the scope of the job, how repeatable it is, and sort of the complexity, right, that the recruiter's going after.
I'm literally pulling up talent wall. I'm like, tell me what
Yeah.
department you want, and I'll tell you.
Yeah. I would even say on our engineering teams, we've even dropped to 5. We're seeing 5 per quarter because of the competitiveness of the business, and we don't want it to be there, and we want, but it has. Our decline rate has changed, and again, as I was talking about, the people are self-selecting out in the process, so we're having to do a whole lot more work and not getting those deals to flow through the funnel. But yeah, when my recruiters who start SDRs, they can do 12. They can do 10 to 12. Yeah.
So my senior tech recruiter from February of 2021 to February of 2022 did 68 hires. So we are, but we're just pumping the volume. But she is incredible. I would say on average, I was just having a conversation with Sequoia the other day, and they were saying that what they're seeing is like 5 to 10 on the engineering side. And like, for an SDR recruiter, I would expect them to be doing 15 to 20 because that's if it's volume and it's like the same profile. So it really does depend. Shayna, to Shayna's point, it's like exec recruiting. Maybe they'll do 2 to 3 a quarter, and that's still a huge win. And that still, prevents us from paying massive amounts of agency fees, which we don't pay at all anymore. We have built our agency in-house, but it goes back to like value prop, how fast. We're lucky because we're like kind of seen as like a trendy, cool company right now. So we're getting a lot of inbound, but I don't know if there's that perfect number, but I do know that if you're hiring the right recruiters who are very sales focused and know how to go out and target recruit, and they also are very aligned with their hiring managers, you can expect that volume to still be there. I don't believe COVID is an excuse for that, as I tell my team often.
I love it. All right. 15-ish minutes left. We're going to call this the Beret speed round. We're going to get through as many questions in the Q&A as we can. Let's try to keep it to like 3 or 4 minutes per question. So I'm just going to go from the bottom and go there. So this question is, curious to know if you're disclosing the salary on job descriptions. If not, at what stage are you doing so?
I'm rolling that out today.
Awesome.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. It's like it really is a huge undertaking because we've got it, we rolled out Radford. We're comparing that against market data. We're doing a full-on pay equity analysis internally. We're role-based, so we pay the same amount regardless of where people live anywhere in the world. So it makes the exercise a bit easier, but we're pushing that out today. So I'm super excited. I believe in it.
I love that. Live breaking news on Beret.
Live breaking news. Yeah,
you heard it here first.
Drafting like what we're going to be adding to our job descriptions, but I think it's really important. It goes along with our values of being completely, we put everything out there. We're going to have it all in our handbook, fully transparent.
We do disclose the compensation because we operate in Denver, and it became a law a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And because we do it in Denver and for every remote, now we just do it as a default.
Grindr, same, we're talking about it right now. Today, we don't have it on job descriptions, but we recognize the value, right? It's transparent. It's the direction that the market is moving. To balance that, we ensure that every single recruiter talks comp at every single call, like that first call. But it's a different impact, right? It matters. Having the transparency upfront on that job spec versus having someone actually get to a phone call to learn that information. So totally agree philosophically, and we're exploring how we get to that point. It depends a little bit on where we land first with our market philosophy, right? And compensation philosophy. So once that's fully dialed, then we'll talk about the downstream effect on recruiting. But
Shayna,
super pro.
I just went through all of this. I'm here
Thank
for
you.
you.
Yes. I'll be texting you imminently.
The next Beret AMA is going to have you guys discussing this for everyone.
Yeah.
Or just shots of our text stream.
Exactly. Yeah, we just want your data. All right, next question. I've run into issues with HMs in the past where they don't believe in on-site prep calls. And an HM once told me you give them the answers to the test. How do you suggest we help HMs see the value and importance of on-site prep calls?
On-site, I'm assuming, is a final round interview, right? Is that fair?
For whoever
Or just
asked
like
this
in
question,
general prepping, is it the concept of just prepping candidates in general?
Yeah,
if you ask this question, maybe raise your hand. Oh,
correct.
Interview.
correct. Final interview.
Final interview.
Thanks, Zahid.
Do
Well,
it anyway.
Yeah, I suggest that my recruiters do pre-brief or pre-brief candidates and debrief with candidates between every single stage. That's part of a high-touch candidate process, and we can't disclose to that. We don't know. When you tell a human what's going to be asked, and when they're in the interview, it doesn't come out like that anyway. They don't remember, but I think it's fair to give people an opportunity to be thoughtful about their answers. We're at work, we have time. We have time to think about how we're going to answer. So yeah. I'm a believer in pre-briefs, debriefs, prep calls, all of it.
I'm the wrong person to ask. We're putting all of our interview questions in our handbook for
Right.
candidates.
So
I don't believe that interviewing should be a test.
Yeah.
Yeah. I say recruiter, just do it anyway. Like, you go do your thing, right? You have to remember that no matter your level, you were hired because you're competent. You are the subject matter expert and what is going to close that role. Your job is not to make a hiring manager happy. Your job is to help deliver for the business and to hire the best possible person into roles to succeed for the business. Now, the more you can create hiring manager ownership and drive and involvement in that process, the more successful you're going to be. Absolutely. So you have to negotiate that. But sometimes the best way to bring people along with you is to show them the downstream impact, right? So if you believe that's the right thing to do, go do it now. And then you circle back with that hiring manager once they hired the best hire of their career and explain to them that you talked to that candidate through the entire process and that they gave you feedback that was the best candidate experience and that's why they took the job, right? So part of it is like show versus tell. don't wait for permission. Ask forgiveness where it makes sense in your company.
There's also a lot of
Wow,
data.
Shayna.
There's research and data out there as to why like we should be giving, you know, questions ahead of time, and how that does not impact them to like trick us into hiring the wrong person. So I believe in providing data and like putting together a business case. So I'm happy to help there. Feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks so much, and thanks for the question, Taheen. Appreciate all the kind words, and thanks for answering that question. Let's keep going. Do you have any specific examples of how you've reduced your hiring time or improved efficiency in your recruiting process? I know we've talked about this a little bit, but any specific examples that we can share, or maybe failures? Failures are always fun.
Yeah, go.
Yeah. Really quick, I have a failure. So we were having a really hard time in PDE 3 years ago. And what we did was we tried to have a semi-centralized process and just have people like the Google method. You have people interview and then you tell them after they've accepted the offer where they're gonna, which team they're gonna sit on. And it failed spectacularly. We were not large enough to do that. And people want, again, we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, they want to know who they're gonna be working for and have that connection. So there's a failure.
I made it a company-wide OKR. So I published my OKR that all interviews would be reduced to 5.5 hours or less. And we talked about it at every company meeting and like had like a green or a red next to it. And I did that while also getting buy-in. So I started by educating the business on why we actually have that goal in the first place, why it's important, why data suggests that there's many reasons why we don't need a 10-hour process. And that was a really good way to get buy-in, not I mean, from the entire business. Also on my job description template, which everybody just makes a copy of, it lists it out. And like when you're developing your interview plan, it must be 5.5 hours or less. So it's been an easy thing to implement and control.
Amen. I would say that we've also just done, excuse me, a stage evaluation. So when I first came in, I came in ultimately to set consistency, right? Things were across the board. So do your inventory, make sure you have stage consistency across the company. You don't need to be an enterprise company to do that. You should do that as soon as possible. So we have master stages that every single interview goes through so that we have reliable data for funnel conversion. But when I first came in, we were doing for mobile a sort of we had ultimately 2 technical exercises, like one at the beginning of the process and then one in the middle. And we realized that the beginning of the process was adding very little value and impacting drop-off quite dramatically, right? Candidates didn't want to go through that initial coding experience without talking to a hiring manager. So we streamlined the process. It goes recruiter, hiring manager, candidate exercise, final round. Sometimes we smush that kind of candidate exercise into the hiring manager or final round interview to make it faster. But like consistency and cutting stuff, right? Cut the fat where it's a blocker, and technical exercises, I would argue, are the biggest sort of white elephant. They're the biggest elephant in the room. People are convinced they need them to determine a true fit and talent, to which we could have a whole nother probably conversation. But limit the technical exercises, right? Think about be very specific about their function in the process, where they are, why they're there, what they're vetting, and hold hiring managers accountable for that experience, right? Making sure it's still positive for candidates.
100%. If anybody has it, it's kind of an old school book, but read the book Who, and it talks about that. Like they did some studies and they found that like there were so many hours spent asking about like hobbies, which obviously you shouldn't ask about in the first place. And like somebody's skydiving experience, they'd spent like 2.5 hours or something asking about it. So get yourself tools like a recording tool, I want to name right higher, to ensure that you're capturing everything you need, but you're being really strategic about like, don't go ask about that person's, past again. Focus on the questions that we really want this individual to dig into, and then have them go and watch the other interviews to make sure we're calibrated on like the entire picture.
We have 2 more questions in the Q&A, and then I have one last question I want to ask. So let's do this. What are your favorite sourcing tools? I like how this was asked anonymously, but what are your favorite sourcing tools?
Oh man. So I'm probably not the greatest person to ask this because my whole career until like a couple months ago when I caved, I believed that my recruiters are sourcers and like they need to be in LinkedIn Recruiter and they need to have strong networks. We do have a sourcer now who's fantastic and who really helps for engineering specifically, build top of funnel. Plug for Greenhouse, they acquired a tool called Interseller, which kind of is like a competitor to Gem. So they'll be going live with that soon. So all of you Greenhouse users out there, that'll be helpful. They also just rolled out a talent wall. So not the analytics, but the actual wall, which will be really nice. But I think that there's value in it, but like, quite frankly, we've been able to achieve our results by hiring and enabling really strong recruiters and not, just finding people who know how to go out and engage, sell them on a phone call, and get them hooked.
I love that.
My team uses Top Funnel and loves it, but my wife is a recruiter and they use Gem and they love it. So there you go.
So Interseller is going to replace both of those. So I hear.
Same. We're using Gem. We use a tool called Consider that I quite like because it has sort of alpha and beta tools it's playing with specifically for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it helps you say, okay, like here's the world of talent, but how do we identify underrepresented talent within that, right? So we use that. We are looking into the classics, right? Seek Out, Hire Tool, which is now Hire Easy, Hired.com, especially for mobile engineering. I think the pain point for Grindr is a significant portion of our hiring is mobile engineering, which is arguably the most painful market to be in right now. So painful. It's like, no, we can't give you a Maserati. I'm sorry, next time. But yeah, I would say Greenhouse has done a lot. Greenhouse has also, if anyone's trying to sort of either going with the model of recruiters, it should be a full life cycle, or empowering their own sourcers, Greenhouse has also implemented the inclusion of a CRM tool that they used to charge you for. And so we're working right now on strategically building that up as well, because you can use the CRM tool to collect talent inbound that's passively interested, to create strategic pipelines for executive recruiting, for tech recruiting in the future. So I think it's about, if you're going to make an argument or you have limited budget, be thoughtful about your tooling, right? If you can get a tool like Greenhouse that gives you Interseller, that gives you CRM, probably a better way to spend your money than 6 independent tools that don't speak to one another. So just be thoughtful on your strategy there, but there's no shortage of sourcing tools. I think what you need to do is be very specific on what your pain point is before you go spend the money, and then spend thoughtfully to really address what's going to have the most impact.
I love it.
Zach, you would ask before if there's any podcasts we like, and there's a podcast that I listen to called Talk Talent to Me, and there is a good episode led by somebody who is at Gem talking about the value of a sourcer. And literally it was listening to that episode that convinced me that I need a sourcer. So I recommend the podcast in general, but that was a good particular one.
So much. We'll share that in the Bray group as well. Appreciate that. All right. My second to last question. And this isn't my question, it was asked in the chat, which is, what is the most common reason why you're not closing candidates? Is it salary, location, benefits, culture? And then Christy went on to say, salary in combination with the work hour requirements. I suppose this would have something to do with the company culture as well. It's hard to get good candidates to buy into the culture without the salary to get back to it. How would you answer this question? What's the most common reason you're not closing candidates? It doesn't have to be one of those 4.
I mean, it just is a really competitive market. And sometimes like somebody connects better with another hiring manager, just feels an affinity. The thing to the salary point is like, gone are the days where companies should use salary as an excuse. It's like, get on board, pay people right, like figure out, like hire less, pay more, enable. If you're out there dealing with a leadership team that refuses to pay market rate, then it might be time for you to look for a new job too. I don't know. Like, I want the support of my leadership team to know that like they're going to do what it takes to get the people we need to win.
So I'm going to say I kept hearing that it was salary, salary, salary. And what we looked at was that it's the way that we were evaluating someone's level and how we did that internally. And so we actually have just like inserted a level into our PDE framework. So we have like 3 and like 3.5 and 4. And so now we have a new band. So we can evaluate people effectively. And there's a band that matches what their level is, because it wasn't really a money problem. It's just that the level was too broad. And so we just narrowed the level so we can put people in the right level and pay them appropriately for the level that they're in.
Yeah, agreed to all of the above. I think there is a threshold for everyone, and that's part of the recruiter's job, is figuring out like, what does someone need to pay their bills, pay their mortgage, protect their family, feed their dog. Everyone has that sort of baseline. But then I find in lived experience that beyond that sort of basic threshold, sometimes for candidates that 10 to 20K difference, like it really isn't the differentiator, right? It's how your team carried themselves culturally through the experience. It's who they saw on the interview panel. Did they see themselves on your team or not? It's geographically how flexible you are. It's this confluence of literally all the factors that you said. And so when we're talking about it, this panel is, how do you win? Like, we all want to win, right? We're all competing for the same tiny pool of talent. We all want an 80+% close rate in engineering. I think the answer there goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. It's like, know your differentiators and harness those and use those to your advantage and authentically from start to finish in your process, right? Be consistent, empower candidates. It's a candidate's market. There's no sign that it's going to change. So adapt to that. If you're running an old-fashioned process where you expect candidates to come to you and you're not going to cater to them throughout the process, like, you're going to lose out the gate. So build your team, whether it's small, whether it's big, whether you have a lot of funding, whether you have little funding, build your team for consistency and high touch throughout, because that's a huge differentiator. Do people feel like when they get their offer that you really care about them and you listen and you understand what they need? Or, are they going to go somewhere else where the platform team just gets them better?
You guys are rock stars. Thank you so much. My last question is this, and then I'll give you a minute to think about it before you answer really quickly. And it's, what do you want the folks listening in, the 50 or so TA leaders listening in, and the, hundreds that will listen to the recording, what do you want them to remember from this? What is the one bullet point, the one line that should be the takeaway from the last hour? I'll give you guys 20 seconds. Thank you all for joining. This has been awesome. Really, really appreciate the conversation. The questions were fantastic. Bright Hire, thank you so much for sponsoring. Could not do these types of events without you. We really do try to find partners who can add value to our community, where our community likes using their services, and it's a win-win. I'm a huge believer in sponsors can add value, and that's what we're trying to do here. So thank you so much. Can't wait to do a lot more with you all. You have been great sponsors and partners. I hope I bought you all enough time to answer this question. I'm going to pick out of a hat and say Shayna has to go first.
Oh, all right. I will say, call this, broad strokes. When you think about being a recruiting leader, you think about your recruiting function and your business. Heart and authenticity will get you further than cash compensation every time, right? So decide as a leader or as a recruiter, what your North Star is going to be, and focus on that. Bring it through your entire process, and do not get hyper stuck on just your budget or what you're paying, because there are so many ways to still be differentiated and competitive in the market. And that very much starts with you. It starts with your decisions around how you build the process, your decisions around how you carry and train your team. Like, that's the differentiator, I think.
I love it. Carly, you're next. I'm just going in order now.
Good. Recruiters can make or break a candidate's experience, and it can be the differentiator as to why somebody chooses to join us or not. Never stop putting yourself in a candidate's shoes. It's really easy to become desensitized when you are talking to candidate after candidate, and never let yourself lose the empathy. And then third, even though you said one, is never stop striving to be better. Have a fail forward mentality. Be focused on being the best partner to your hiring manager that you can. Again, we are partners to the business. We are business advisors. We are not resume slingers, and never stop giving the candidates the experience they deserve.
Ooh, I love it. Elizabeth, last but
All
not
right,
least.
well, they said it all, but I'll tell you what I wrote down. You are the most powerful differentiator in the process, to borrow Shayna's words, and speak the language of the heart in the process, because that's, and you know.
I love it. You guys are rock stars. This is so much fun. We're gonna do it again. Thanks for the questions.
Everyone.
Such positive feedback.
Thank
Can't wait to see you guys
you.
soon. In-person events are back. We're doing them monthly. We're gonna see a lot of you in a lot of really cool restaurants and cities. So thanks so much, everybody. See you soon.
Thanks
Bye.
all.
Zach, thanks everyone.
Bye.